All right, this is the Coast to Coast Combat Hour, Tuesday, March 10th. So far, surviving the coronavirus along with me, Matthew Hawkins, and this week we are joined by managing editor of MMAnews.com, Fernando Quiles Jr., who was with me at the Bellator MMA press conference yesterday, and obviously we all put our eyes across UFC 248. So welcome, Fernando. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so you guys made it out there to New York City, huh? What was the vibe around there, especially with the combination of Viacom and CBS now?
You know what? I think it was pretty interesting because of, me and Ed were talking about how potentially there may be something there with Showtime that Bellator president Scott Coker may announce, but nothing was announced as of yet. Coker did say in the beginning of the press conference that he's looking forward to the next year, 2 years, even 3 years, but he didn't really hint at anything in terms of potentially being on Showtime or even Bellator being on CBS for like maybe a show a year or something like that. But other than that, we really just took in the growth of Bellator over the last few years, and I think that was my main takeaway as it pertains to anything Viacom and CBS.
Yeah, I mean, I had Fernando and I sat next to each other when they were doing everything, and one of the things I mentioned to him was like I was like, I don't know if they're going to talk about Steven Espinosa or, what was I forget, one of the other speculations that I made was that they would become making a New York announcement because they're in New York, and we didn't get that. But there was a lot of events, and I didn't realize how many guys from SBG were going to be there. And I know we're going to talk about UFC 248, but we might as well get into it. It was it went from like your average like press conference, like, hey, here's some dates and here's some fights, to here's some fights almost right now. So it was pretty crazy. I mean, I didn't realize there was so much heat between the Pitbull brothers, Jim, and the SBG.
I just saw a bunch of still photos. I didn't catch the entire interview. I saw, or the press conference. I saw about the first 20 minutes or so, up until where they kind of introduced all the guys for the stage, and then a couple of the surprises were we get Chandler Henderson too, and AJ McKee maintaining his spot in the tournament. Despite the rumors, or I don't know if they were rumors or if it's 100% true, he had reconstructive knee surgery, but he's got Caldwell on June 6th. I believe you talked to Antonio McKee. AJ McKee. What was his? What's the situation with his knee?
Well, he did have surgery, and he said he's good to go. If the full interview's up at MMAnews.com's YouTube channel. I'll be sure and add like the links and the cards and stuff once this stream is done for folks to check it out. There'll be articles coming off of that too. But pretty much the gist of it is he did have the injury. He did have surgery. He's doing good. He's already back to training. He said he's working his way up to doing squats and stuff like that. So he's not concerned at all about being delayed. We actually worked the room pretty well, Fernando and I. So we almost got like half of no one got Darren Caldwell because he kind of left. If you look at the photo, he actually had a mask on. I don't know if that was coronavirus or intimidation stuff. But we worked the room pretty well. So the injury thing is true, and but he's all right. I mean, he was a little bit he tried to get at Caldwell's head a little bit during the face off. So that was my conversation with him. Fernando, you know what? I didn't really get to look at the interviews because we got a lot of views off of that Nemkov interview. So can you just take us through what he had to say?
Well, basically, I had asked Vadim Nemkov because the funny thing is, right, just before Nemkov, I interviewed Ryan Bader, and Bader was telling me that even though he respects Nemkov and thinks that he deserves this light heavyweight title opportunity, he feels like there's a lot of holes in this game. And he mentioned the cardio there's a big question about Nemkov's cardio. So I asked Nemkov about Bader's comments, and he said that he's actually been working on his cardio in the lead up to this fight. And he said that he himself sees a lot of holes in Bader's game that he'll be looking to exploit as well. He made a very funny comment. I asked him about all the fracas that was going on between SBG Ireland and the Pitbull brothers. His response, I thought, was incredible. He said that, they're a bunch of little guys. So, the little guys always feel like they have something to prove, something to that effect, and that the bigger guys are usually more calm and reserved. So I thought that was a great answer. But Nemkov, to me, it seems like he seems ready for the opportunity. Whether or not the cardio improvements will actually come remain to be seen.
Yeah, how did what did Bader look like? When you see Bader when he's a heavyweight, he's a monster. He's been a monster generally at light heavyweight when I've seen him. I've never ran into him during fight week for a light heavyweight, but what did he look like? Did he look huge? Does he look like he has a lot of work to do to get down to 205? This will be the first time really that he's lived kind of as a heavyweight and he'll have to get down to light heavyweight for a fight. Did he hint at all at what his weight was like right now?
Well, the interesting thing about that is that Bader, for his last heavyweight fight, actually weighed in at 228 pounds. That's not too far off, too bad of a cut going down to 205. So I asked him about whether or not, the weight. I told him myself, I would imagine it's not much of a problem for you, but whether or not going back and forth between light heavyweight and heavyweight would be an issue. He said no. He said that he goes pretty much where his body wants him to go, and his body wants him to go to light heavyweight, and so does Bellator right now. So I don't think it'll be much of an issue. Looking at him, he seems like he's at a good size. He's always looked strong, even when he cuts down to 205 pounds. I don't think it'll be an issue for him at all.
It's interesting that he would be. Because I think, I was at both those fights. The Fedor fight, I think he weighed in at like 236, 237, and then he came in at 228 for Congo. So you'd think it would almost be the opposite, but it worked out well for him in both situations.
Yeah.
Nemkov seems to kind of have that same Team Fedor attitude as Tokov and Fedor. I mean, obviously it's got to be Fedor rubbing off on these guys, or if it's just the Russian mentality, but they all seem to have the same kind of mentality, is just kind of cyborgish, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like not no emotion, but just there to do business. I think it's actually going to be a big year for that team. It's not going to be easy for Nemkov, but I think Tokov and Tokov, I don't know what I want to call him, Tokov Jr. or his little brother. I think those guys are really on a path to do some damage at Bellator.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And as far as that whole demeanor, they definitely have a weird, like everyone in the room kind of, and me and Fernando actually talked about that when because Fedor was there yesterday too. And just so you know, Fernando, Fedor is like, that's Matt's man crush, 9,000. He's got the sweater, he's got pictures and everything. And, and Matt's in California. So if he's got a replica of that ugly sweater and he wears that in hot ass California to Fedor's fights when Fedor fights. So that's
I still think I'm probably the only person in the world that Fedor asked to take a picture with.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what you get when you wear you're the only person that owns the same sweater as him. But you did get him to smile though, so that was good too, because he wasn't smiling, and I asked my question kind of like when I asked Nemkov like about the whole Fedor connection, like obviously because he's fighting Bader, and there's that whole, there's a story there of revenge and stuff like that. And he was like, it's my fight, but I'm definitely going to wreck him for Fedor too. But it was definitely something that those two guys, because of their size and their mass alone, it's just like, Fernando, not for nothing, Fernando's a pretty big dude. So, you're pretty tall yourself. So, as far as like eye level, how was it like standing in front of him? I know you were speaking through his translator, right?
Yes, I was speaking through his translator. His translator was definitely shorter than both of us. I can tell you that. But as far as Nemkov himself, I do believe that we were pretty much about the same height. But man, Nemkov is built. Nemkov is in really good shape. Yeah,
as far as he's big, tall, and he's he's got shoulders from like one side of the room to the other. But one interesting thing that happened when those guys started getting into it, because you asked them about it. He made the little guy. I feel like everybody must have asked what was your take on all the drama in the room. And no matter what fighter they spoke to, everyone kind of wanted their reactions to it. So I definitely asked that to everybody in the interviews that are up on the MMA News YouTube channel. But one thing that happened to Fernando that was funny is that one of the early points where they started getting at each other was in the middle of Fernando's questions. I don't remember what you said that kind of got everybody fired up. When even Scott Coker kept saying to Fernando, like, next question, and then Fernando was asked it. He was like, I'll take the Coker's advice and continue. But I forgot what you asked.
It was James Gallagher. It wasn't even a question to spark the whole argument. All I asked James Gallagher was for his reaction to Royce Gracie's kind words to him. Royce Gracie was recently on MMA Fighting's Eurobash podcast, and he had given Gallagher some props. He said that not only does Gallagher have the talent, but he has the discipline. So I asked for Gallagher's reaction to that. And, towards the end of Gallagher's response, Cal Eleanor really got fired up, and those two just kept trading back and forth.
Wow. Was there so I mean, what they took questions while on stage? Did they do a scrum after that? Is that how you got to a lot of people as well?
Yeah.
Cool. Huh. Well, I mean, it's going to be a hell of a weekend this week. Did Pitbull? I mean, Pitbull's never had a problem making 145. As far as you guys could tell, everything between him and Sanchez and Weichel, everything.
I spoke with Weichel. I spoke with Pedro Carvalho. Sanchez kind of left early too. Him and Caldwell kind of pulled a like backdoor like piece. Like I know a couple other media folks got to speak to them, and then they kind of left. But that's actually one of the things I spoke with both Carvalho and I spoke with Weichel, and I actually asked them about. I asked them how they felt. I asked them about if they were worried about shaking hands and stuff like that in New York because of the whole coronavirus issue. That's one thing that they asked at the press conference too, is if with all the cancellations we keep hearing about, I mean even today, if there's any plans on canceling the Bellator 241 up in Connecticut. I mean, if you look at John Hopkins has a really good like heat map of places that are getting hit with the virus and what's confirmed, what's presumptive, deaths and all that. And there's not a lot going on. There's not a lot going on in Connecticut, period. But as far as viruses are concerned, there's not a lot going on in that aspect either. But they said they're keeping in touch with the venue and keeping informed. They'll be doing media there starting tomorrow. And then obviously the weigh-ins are Thursday and the fights are on Friday. So it doesn't look like that there's any threat of it being canceled. The fighters, again, you can see their answers up on the MMA News YouTube channel. The interviews are up there, but they seem like they're good to go. Nobody seemed really worried about it. Did you ask anybody about that, Fernando, when you were there yesterday?
I did not, but the general sense is that I think that everybody took it in stride. As a matter of fact, I can't speak for Darian Caldwell. Maybe in other interviews he had a different take on it, but I honestly think that the mask he had on was just for show and just a cool, photo op right there. I don't think that anybody was too worried about it or too concerned about it. I get that New York City recently surpassed Washington when it comes to the number of folks that have been infected by the coronavirus. But from what I was there, I don't think that anybody was concerned. I think that it would have been great if Scott Coker was a part of the media scrums. He did not partake in the media scrums. I think he would have been the best person to ask if this hurt business in any way. But from the sense that I got, I don't think that anybody was too concerned about it. They just focused on fighting.
Couple things that work. Well, one thing that kind of works in Bellator's favor right now is that after this event on Friday, their next event isn't for like 2 months till May 9th. So while as a fight fan, you might be kind of bummed out that they don't have an event for 2 months, it actually probably works well in their favor. I don't know if you saw the news, but Santa Clara County, which is San Jose in Northern California, actually put a block, or I don't know what the exact word is, but they banned gatherings of over 1,000 people for the next 3 weeks. So Sharks games at the SAP Center in San Jose, I think are going to be postponed or moved or played in empty arenas. I'm not sure exactly how this is all going to work out. I think that'll probably affect any high school games. I don't know if there's basketball playoffs or anything like that it'll affect, but they did that for 3 weeks, so that'll take us essentially to the end of this month, and then they'll regroup and figure out a new plan. But I know my San Jose flights that I have dropped like another $40. So round trip now to San Jose is like $68 or something like that. So, as for a consumer, it's great if you want to travel, but I'm just curious to see what's going to happen with that. I mean, I hope it doesn't, God,
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens in Brooklyn with UFC, the Habib Ferguson fight. I mean, as it stands right now, I think it would be overreaction to start canceling these things, but the way it goes, you never know where we're going to be in 6 weeks or so. But how do you guys see the tournament fights going this weekend? I don't know if you've done any predictions for MMAnews.com yet, but how do you see Pitbull and Carvalho and Weichel and Sanchez unfolding this weekend?
I'll let you go. You can go first, Fernando.
So the interesting thing about it is that I actually asked Patricio Pitbull because he had 2 wars with Emmanuel Sanchez and Daniel Weichel, and he said it was so hard to decide which of the 2 were going to win, but it appeared like he was leaning a little towards Daniel Weichel because of the punching power. He said he felt like Daniel Weichel really gave him a tough test with his punching power, more so than even Sanchez, but even that is just ever so slight. That's going to be such a highly contested matchup. Obviously, when Sanchez fought Pitbull, that there was a lot of work being done in the clinch against the fence. Those 2 were so evenly matched, but Pitbull just got the better of him, just barely outworked him. And then Daniel Weichel almost stopped Pitbull in their first fight, only for Pitbull to come back and knock him out. And those 2 could very well be fighting a third time. So that fight is really hard for me to decide. I guess gun to the head, I would probably choose Emmanuel Sanchez. But Weichel could very well take the win. It's such a toss-up. As far as Patricio Pitbull goes, I think he's going to take this. I think he's going to retain and move on in the tournament. That's how I see things playing out.
It's hard for me to pick against Pitbull, just because of the way that they fight, the way they come. I mean, I don't want to say it's brawling or whatever, because I know they train and there's some technique to what they do, especially with their boxing. But yeah, it's hard for me to pick against them. But I mean, as far as I did talk to Pedro Carvalho, and he seemed so cool. He seemed so calm, cool, and collected. And in the interview, I think he says it in the interview. I don't know if he said it after I turned off the camera, but he was like, I can make weight right now if they need me to. Like, I'm good to go. He told me he came early so he could acclimate, get over travel and everything. And I mean, he wasn't worried about getting sick or anything like that. Neither was Weichel. I didn't even, I keep forgetting that Weichel's nickname is Drake. And then he had on a very coordinated outfit at the press conference. So yeah, when I talked to him too, I was just like, all right, I mean, these guys seem ready to go. But it's Weichel I've seen fight enough that I do like his odds. But as far as Pitbull and Carvalho, I mean, it's hard, like I said, it's hard for me to pick against him.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I've said it on the show before, I think Pitbull's a special talent in MMA right now. Obviously he's the champ featherweight and lightweight champ for Bellator, but I think he's been a killer now for a long time, one of the faces of Bellator. I tend to go with I think he gets a TKO finish, maybe third, fourth round. I think Carvalho put up a good fight, but I think he'll get the fight down to the ground perhaps, but I think down there he'll get beat up a little bit, and I don't think it'll end well for him. Weichel Sanchez, I see pretty much you guys kind of a coin flip. Both those guys were really two of the highlights of the opening round of this tournament. Both put on almost career performances.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, Sanchez looked great against Claxton, finishing him, and then Weichel picked up a decision over Rogers. But I was at both of those events, and the Weichel, I was really impressed with Weichel because I wasn't necessarily sure he was going to win that fight. I thought maybe he was kind of going to start to hit the downside of his career a little bit, but his performance was outstanding. I'm going to probably go. I know Weichel won the first fight by split decision. I think I'm going to lean towards him a little bit, but I certainly wouldn't bet money on this fight. I think it's going to be another close decision between the two. Sanchez adds a little bit of new flavor if he wins this fight. I know him and Pitbull had a really close championship battle. I think in your neck of the woods a couple of years back now. So that would actually be the rematch I'd prefer to see. And obviously AJ McKee and Pitbull I think would be the fantasy final in a sense at this point, assuming AJ McKee is knee. That'll be interesting now. I mean, Caldwell really turns out to be probably the worst matchup for McKee at this point. With it, you know, coming off of a knee injury, having to perhaps fight off the takedowns and stuff. That'll be an interesting to see how that unfolds. But yeah, I'm going to go with Weichel in a close decision and Pitbull by finish. Card's really loaded. I'm just kind of catching a glance at it. But again, another guy I've praised, and one of my all-time favorites, Paul Daley, one of the kings of violence in MMA. He's on the card. Nick Newell, one of the one of the staples, kind of the East Coast MMA at this point. Tokov, Mitrione, filling in for Josh Barnett. That's an interesting situation. Have you guys heard anything else about Josh Barnett? About a month ago, we heard that he was going to be pulled from the card for failing a test with Mohegan Sun while in. I don't know if was it a pre-fight test for something? Was it a random test when he was somewhere? Do you guys know much about that story?
I know Nolan King has the details on it over at MMA Junkie, but I don't know if Fernando read anything on it.
I don't know many details on it except for that when Barnett, we obviously know in the past he's had certain issues with USADA. What I know for sure is that Bellator official Mike Mazzulli, what's his role in Bellator again?
He's the athletic. He's the head of the athletic commission for Mohegan Sun. That's the sovereign land for the Mohegan tribe. So usually, like, he handles when they go overseas. He's also he handles all the sanctioning and stuff like that. Since a lot of places don't even have regulatory bodies when they go overseas. So he's pretty much the guy. They use him a lot, and Mohegan Sun's one of the. That's why they go there so much, because Mohegan Sun has hosted them a lot, and Mazzulli understands the sport and has he's done a lot of work with Bellator since the Bjorn Rebney days.
So I do believe that in that article, Mazzulli said that unless Barnett can get this whole thing cleared, that he's not going to be booked with Bellator going forward. So he's got to clear that up quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of like Josh Barnett. He's old school, but he's burned a lot of bridges. I think Bellator, honestly, at this point, would be smart to maybe separate themselves from him.
It's
let
funny.
Him go do his thing in Japan.
Yeah, it's funny nobody asked about that, and it's probably because that Japan door is open. I know Coker only announced things through the summer, but he also kind of hinted that they're going to have some more surprises for the end of the year. I have a feeling it's going to be like another collaboration with Ryzen in Japan, but who knows about my feelings, because I've been wrong half the time about half of everything I say anyway, since in the recent days of MMA, including my picks. But with that, I guess we can leave Bellator behind us and
real quick before it slips. When I came out there for Bellator New York, the 180 New York card, have they had another New York card? Was there another one that I'm just not thinking of in my head, or was that their only trip out?
In Madison Square Garden.
Okay, I thought there was another one. I just couldn't. So it's fairly recent then. Okay.
Yeah, no, that they've been since you went to that one. They've been to the Garden twice and in Nassau Coliseum once.
That's right. The Fedor Sonnen at Nassau.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Cool. Yeah. Move on to UFC this past weekend. 2 world title fights. A little bit of controversy that seems to really show up at every UFC event these days, whether it's judging or refereeing or just weight cutting, I guess. I guess the biggest takeaway from the event was the amazing women's strawweight fight. Weili Zhang, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Man, we talked about last weekend that we thought this was going to be a barn burner and potential fight of the year, fight of the night. Really lived up to that. A lot of people think it's the greatest female MMA fight of all time, and really one of the, I mean, you can't say top 10 necessarily, but you could easily start to fall in the top 25, top 50 MMA fights of all time. Great fight. I don't know how you guys saw it. Despite what she looked like, I had Joanna edging it out. Not a robbery in any account. I think it was 3-2 either way, and that's obviously how the judges saw it. But I thought Joanna did a little bit more. She didn't look like it. I think had she not come in looking out like Marvin the Martian, I think I think she might have swayed the judges a little bit. But I don't know how you guys saw it.
Fernando, you go ahead.
That was a close one. At the end, I had thought to myself, I think Weili did enough to win it, but maybe just barely. I wouldn't have been upset if it had went Joanna's way, but it's like you were saying, Matt. I do think that part of how Joanna looked probably played a role in the judge's decision. Anytime you come out of a fight looking like that, people think that you really had the work put on you, but in reality, Joanna was there every single step of the way. I thought that if Weili would get in the clinch, that she would shock a lot of people and dominate Joanna, because in the past Joanna has had success in the clinch. I just thought that Weili was just on another level there. As it turns out, just all areas of MMA, it's just those two were just neck and neck. So while I did give Weili the win slightly, right, that may be biased because I picked Weili to win the fight before. So there you go.
Yeah, no, you know what, man? I mean, one of the things is, like you said, it's a big takeaway. I made sure the editorials that I do for MMAnews.com is actually Fernando's idea to do the 7 takeaways pieces, and that was one of the things I took away was just how awesome that fight was. Number one, number two. I mean, I know sometimes like Matt, you like to walk away and say who you think won. Like that was probably one of the fights that I was just like, man, I don't even want to give an opinion on it because I feel like it needs to happen again. So that, I mean, I'm a fan of finishers. I like to see folks finish, but this was just almost like, first of all, I was pissed off that, like, why are you going to talk to Joanna after, like sometimes you don't always need to interview the loser, especially if they got knocked out really bad, or B, if they looked like, she had a whole John Merrick Elephant Man thing going with her forehead, that I'm like, yo, she needs to get iced down and see a doctor. Stop talking to her. She even said, like, at one point in the interview, like, listen, my head's not, but she's still, she's a warrior. I mean, I actually picked her to win. So the fact that it was a split decision, the thing that I wrote in the 7 takeaways piece was this, though. They need to do it again. It needs to be a main event, and it should have been a main event, especially on, it's a Women's History Month. The following day, I mean, I guess it was technically because it was like around midnight when it happened. It was already International Women's Day. You should have put those ladies at the top of the card, only because of what we saw in the main event. So
yeah, I mean, well, that was hindsight. I mean, I think we all thought the main event was going to be great. I mean, I tend to agree with you on the interviews. I think there needs to be a time at some point where both of those ladies especially probably should have just been taken to the hospital. I did think the positive of interviewing Joanna was that she always has had this reputation since she lost her first few fights of kind of being not gracious in loss. I mean, that's been one of that's why a lot of people don't like her, is they think that she's just too cocky and hasn't accepted her losses. And she made some excuses in her Rose fights. I don't think she made many excuses for Shevchenko. I think she realizes she lost that fight pretty good, but she came off pretty humble. Congratulated the winner, didn't make any excuses. I mean, she talked about her head being swollen up, but I think that was a relevant excuse to a point. I don't think anybody was going to call her out for making up anything on that. So I thought that was good. I think a rematch is called for. In a big venue like that in Vegas, that being a headline fight, as much as we love it, and maybe a rematch can do it, it still is hard for it to carry the weight of the ticket sales. And as much as we love that fight, and we might be fans of women's MMA, it's still hard. As of the morning of the event, there was still a ton of tickets available. So even with the Adesanya Romero headliner, they were still, I think, struggling, and that might have had something to do with the coronavirus situation. But basically, when they have the events at T-Mobile, it's hard for them to sell out unless you're getting in there with the McGregors and the Cormier Miocic fights, that kind of stuff. Other than that, even the 245 with Holloway Volkanovski and that whole stacked card up until the morning of the fight, there was still quite a few tickets available. So I don't know. I'd like to see a rematch. I get back to, man, I wish they would do the fight week multiple events. I think that would be a hell of a Friday night main event leading into maybe a McGregor fight, or we got the rumors now of maybe Adesanya, Costa, and Masvidal, and Usman. So I mean, there's a potential for a lot of action. But
one last thing on Zhang and Joanna. I mean, I still say if they do it, obviously maybe not T-Mobile Arena, but Joanna's got a following. Joanna's got a following here on the East Coast in New York. If they did it at the Garden or Barclays, I mean, I'm sure they could main event her and she'd draw because she's got a big following out here. I'm sure Fernando can attest to that, being in New York as a resident, and I'm kind of just a visitor coming out from dirty ass Jersey, but. Like right, Fernando. I mean, when they've come out here, when Joanna's been out here, she usually draws a pretty big crowd with the flags and everything, right?
Well, Ed, to your point, yes, Joanna does have a following here in New York, and they do enjoy her. But it's interesting that you brought up potentially booking that fight for New York City, because I don't know if you caught it at the post-fight press conference. Dana White was asked what he thinks should be next for Wei Li once she heals, and he said Madison Square Garden. So that may be where they're heading next.
Do you think I mean, obviously she's the champ. And Ed and I talked about how she kind of got there, and things kind of might have fallen in place a little bit. I think Joanna was her first. I mean, Jessica Andrade is a killer, but I think this was the first step as far as fighting a top woman in the world. Competitor. How do you see her? I think that the results of this last fight also helps raise Namajunas' confidence a little bit. She seems to be a fairly a bit of an emotional, not so much emotional fighter in the cage, but up until her fight time. So I was wondering how she was going to react. I mean, obviously she's got her rematch coming up after her loss, but if I'm her and seeing that fight go down the way it did, my confidence of a rematch and getting my belt back with either of those ladies down the line is up there. How do you see, let's say they hold off on Joanna and Rose wins her upcoming fight at UFC 250. How do you see Rose and Zhang unfolding, Fernando?
To be honest with you, I think the most important thing Rose needs to worry about is that rematch against Jessica Andrade. She was dropped on her head hard in that second round and was knocked out. And for a while, we didn't know if she would come back to MMA competition. She was talking about how relieving it was to lose the championship. It was very odd for us at the time to wrap our heads around. So I think that would be the most the thing that she needs to worry about the most. However, if she does get past her, that may be one of the most technically sound strawweight matches, forget strawweights, women's matches we've ever seen. Just the two standing up after seeing the Joanna fight made me think that, Rose actually has a shot, but she only has a shot if her mind is right. And that's the thing that we need to find out when she gets this rematch against Jessica Andrade.
Yeah, one of the things, just to add on to the whole potential of Namajunas and Zhang with the Jessica Andrade thing that Fernando just mentioned, remember, you got to remember that Andrade was losing that fight, though. Andrade was not doing well. It's if you rewatch it, Rose makes the mistake of holding on. I guess she thought she had a submission. I think she was trying to do a kimura or a choke. I forget exactly how she got lifted, but I mean, a lot of folks train for slams. If you watch, I mean, now we're going to go back. Matt's mind is already probably there, but if you go back and you look at Rampage versus Sakuraba, Rampage was known for slams back then, and he tried to slam. There's a couple of times where he tries to slam Kazushi Sakuraba, and what Sakuraba does the opposite. He actually goes limp, lets go, and the effectiveness of the slam not only goes away, but it's like if you were trying to slam like your blanket in that you sleep or you cover yourself. If you try to slam it, and how it somehow kind of like wraps itself around you again. That's kind of like the effect you're looking for outside of just break falling and protecting yourself from what happened. So that wasn't just we all make stupid mistakes in training and in martial arts, and that was something that Rose did that she's probably beat herself up over. But the other thing is too, like you said, Fernando, the fact that she doubted a return, that might have an effect on the type of Rose that we get in a rematch. So
yeah, I mean, I think the fight where when she got slammed, I mean, I think it's such a rarity that I don't think a lot of these fighters necessarily. I mean, I don't think it's that they don't understand that what could happen, but you just don't see it doesn't happen very often. I mean, if you remember the play-by-play for that fight, I think it was Cormier and Rogan, and they were basically stating that Rose can't be slammed in that position because for some reason she had the Kimura lock, and I'm sitting there going, well, she's going to pick her up and screwdrive her in the damn mat, and she almost did. I think if I remember right, she kind of came close once before that, maybe,
yeah,
and maybe Rose kind of let off a little bit, or she landed more on her shoulder. I can't remember exactly, but I'm sitting there going, dude, this chick is muscular and superhuman strength for a 115-pound woman. She's gonna pick her up and spike her. So
one thing about, I mean, she's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and I'll tell you what, there's I made a joke about when you train, when you go through the levels, when you're I always say when you get your purple belt, you're always feeling yourself a little bit, and that's what leads to injuries. I myself, I sprained my intercostal twice. There's a bunch of dudes that I train with that competed, and they're like, I can take this ankle lock, and then had their foot bent the other way. You know what I mean? It's just it's I don't want to say it's overconfidence, but I mean it's obviously it's a point where you're doing a lot of trial and error, and a lot of times you find out, okay, now for next time I know, but you usually find out in situations like that, an injury, a loss, and that's what happened with her. But the whole thing, like you said about Rogan commenting on, what I remembered about that was I was like, this is how when we get old, because I'm up there myself. When we get old, we start saying a lot of stupid shit, and sometimes you just don't notice the stupid shit that comes out of your mouth until after the fact. He also said like Ronda Rousey beating Mayweather and stuff like that, and then retracted it. So we can't, we can't.
That event though, because that was in Brazil. Rogan never goes to Brazil.
It might not have been Rogan. It might have been Cormier was there for sure. Cruz and Cormier. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Now that you say that, I wasn't sure 100% on Rogan, but yeah, Cruz and Cormier. Not that Ed's point still stands. Rogan says plenty of stupid shit. But he did get a bye that night. Now you say that it was Cruz and. Which honestly makes it a little bit more surprising. I mean, I know Rogan's got a jiu-jitsu background, but you would think, and it's kind of one of those defenses that guys go to. So it's not. I mean, maybe if you have, I don't know, but anyways, I mean that fight's going to be a great rematch. Rose will probably come out and throw a flying triangle up in the first 30 seconds and win the fight or something crazy like that, knowing her past. But the main event of this past Saturday night, most people thought was going to be kind of the fight of the year candidate.
Yeah.
Turned out to be more like the Detroit dance at UFC 9 between Severn and Shamrock in their rematch, but. I don't really know what to say. I'm not. I mean, I thought it was going to be a great fight, but it really doesn't surprise me how it unfolded. It seems like this is just this is the sport that we love, and it happens all the damn time. I guess my biggest frustration, and for fans who didn't see it, Israel Adesanya retained his belt, unanimous decision, 3 rounds to 2 on 2 of the cards, 4 rounds to 1 on a third card. I had it 3 rounds to 2 Romero. I picked Adesanya to win the fight, so this wasn't one that necessarily I was going with the guy. I don't know. I'm not sure how we talk about this all the time with the judging. The first round was a freak show situation where you literally had Romero basically standing still for like 4 minutes, but managing to land like the only 4 punches of the round, or essentially landing the only legitimate punches of the round, I should say. I don't even know where to score it. We've talked about 10-10 rounds. I think we talked about that with one of the boxing guys we've had on the show. We talked to him about there should be more 10-10 rounds. I think the first round probably would have been prime 10-10 round. Hector. There you go. But I mean, I saw Romero winning 3 rounds to 2, barely. The stats, if they mean anything, kind of bear that out. I think I saw the strike stats, but that doesn't necessarily mean much. What did you think, Ed? I mean, other tn the frustration of the fight, did you even care who won when it was all said and done?
I did, but I'd actually like to hear from Fernando, because this is something we were so involved in our Bellator assignments that we didn't even talk about 248. So I'll let Fernando go.
Well, you know how we were speechless for the co-main event. We were speechless for all the wrong reasons in the main event. I did score the first round 10-10, and pretty much I think I had to fight a draw as a result of that. It was just
good, man. I like
that. If I could, I'd scored 0-0 for both men. It was that bad of a fight. I don't agree with Dana White a lot when he starts bashing on fighters. I will agree that if you're the challenger in Yoel Romero and you're coming off 2 straight losses and you didn't even really deserve this title opportunity, you got this title opportunity because Paulo Costa had to undergo surgery. We need to see more of that. Look, doing enough to win the fight, yes, obviously, but there was really no sense of urgency from Romero, and Adesanya has no reason to show a sense of urgency if he feels like, okay, I'll just stand back and keep kicking that lead leg. Really bizarre fight. How Romero was trying to go Adesanya into fighting. I thought maybe in the first 1 or 2 rounds that what Romero was trying to do was lure Adesanya into a false sense of security. He did a similar thing against Luke Rockhold. I mean, he was more slow and plotting early in that fight, but then he caught him, I believe, in the 3rd round with his explosive power. And really, that's just not what happened. So I thought it was a pretty disappointing performance from both guys. But Adesanya was the champion, and his goal was to retain. And Romero didn't do much for a guy who really this was his last opportunity.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, if you actually, and I often take myself outside of my own fan shoes after an event. When it's happening, I'm with you. I'm just as pissed as you guys are. I'm kind of like, what the F's going on here? It always takes me at least 20 to 30 minutes after everything has finished before I go back and step outside of myself and say, let me just try to be objective about it. So, and I wrote about it. It is one of the takeaways in the 7 takeaways piece. But it's to the point that you said, Fernando. If you're the challenger, especially if you're Romero, and this is likely your last shot at it, at some point in the fight, you have to go. I mean, if you're going 0-0-0 to lull him into a false sense of security, you got to go to 100 at some point. And you would think that point would have been rounds 3 and 4. But I think it was around the 3rd or 4th round that I was just like, Adesanya is going to win this whole thing just throwing leg kicks. And that's pretty much what happened. I mean, I know I saw a pretty good image of Romero's leg from the 4th round, and it was pretty lumped up. I know he was dancing salsa or whatever at the press conference to show that he was all right. But, I mean, it's anything you do in training in martial arts, when you take hits and stuff, you feel the worst of it the next day, not the night of or the day of. So, yeah, man. I mean, I was disappointed, but I people want to, if you're to assign fault to anyone, for me, and I hate to say it because I actually picked Romero's fat ass to win, but I know he's not fat. But as back in the day, I used to call big dudes that were jacked fat just to mess with them. But yeah, I picked him to win just because I actually thought one of my training partners actually had a great quote that I was going to use if Romero won. And he said, Romero's got more than a puncher's chance, and he just never took that chance. So
I just think Romero's a horse of a different color. I mean, he's just a weird dude. I mean, we can say it's
I won't argue that.
You know what I mean? We can say that there's the language barrier or but he just it's as if.
Yeah.
I mean, when he's doing first of all, I thought he won. Or a draw. I mean, I didn't think Adesanya won the fight. I was not impressed with Adesanya. To me, if you're the undefeated champion, go in there and eliminate these fools. Most dominant champions over history do that. Now, all dominant champions also have fights similar to this. So hopefully this is a one-off for Israel. And I have no reason to believe that it's not. But, I just... for Romero to take the mic at the end and kind of his whole shtick about, how he was the one ready to fight, it's as if he doesn't remember that he stood there still in the middle of the cage for 4 minutes with covering up. He didn't throw the first strike of the fight for 3.5, 4 minutes. I just, it's so bizarre. And it's as if he doesn't, now he's the people's champ, quote unquote, I guess. It's like, where does it not compute in his head that he's 0-3 in title fights? Granted, a lot of people thought he won at least one of the Whitaker fights. I tend to also kind of fall into that category.
Yeah.
But it's all similar to this, where he gave away rounds. He had rounds where he really just doesn't do anything, and I feel like that's always it's even his non-title fights. I feel even with Costa, who Jake Sage mentions how he'd love to see that fight in July for Fight Week, Costa and Adesanya. I feel like even Romero Costa, I mean, even in the war we saw, I feel like the early in that fight, Romero was kind of lackadaisical, and it's like he relies on this. And those are 3 rounds fights. Maybe he thought for a 5-round fight he'd be able to work it. We also mentioned how for a gold medalist wrestler, the dude just doesn't use wrestling. I mean, I get the fame and the glory of winning a huge knockout.
Cormier actually commented on that during the fight that he almost with frustration, he just doesn't wrestle.
I mean, they shouldn't even mention that he's a silver medalist Olympic wrestler anymore. I mean, it's just like they might as well mention that he was a sandcastle champion in Cuba in 1976. It doesn't. It's irrelevant. It'd be like mention someone's a K1 champion and then pulling guard nonstop.
You think they're gonna have sandcastle building on the zone?
I'd rather watch that than a replay of that fight. But it's just a weird thing. So I don't. It's frustrating because
I bet you it's on ESPN Plus.
You ain't gonna pay for it. You'll pay for as much of that as you do for the fights. Yeah. But anyway, so frustrating. Romero still has the name value. He's still gonna have. I mean, he's up there. What is he? 42, 43 now. He's still gonna have a couple good big fights in the UFC. Yeah. I don't think he gets to the title fight, but. Again, who the hell knows? If he steps in last minute against somebody and knocks out a Darren Till or knocks out another Gastelum, somebody else who's kind of in line. I mean, the chips can fall. Yeah. He's got a title shot coming off of 2 losses. If he picks up another a top 5 win, who knows? Dana White will say anything. But I don't see it happening. But maybe that's in his mind. He just thinks I was just gifted a title shot now, and why can't I get gifted another one? I don't know, but a lot of Adesanya Costa seems like definitely the fight to make. I don't really see any other fight that there is, assuming that and assuming everybody stays clean to get to that point. Costa looked like he was about 275 over the weekend, so he's gonna have to lay off the
Fernando
Brazilian barbecue a little bit.
Yeah, no, seriously, he was looking a little thick in the crowd there. But Fernando, you watched the press conference, right?
I watched some of it, some of Dana White's what Dana White had.
So that's what I'm trying to figure, because I got the sense that Dana White pretty much said that he's not going to give Romero any other chances because of that performance. He said last year. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He said flat out that this was Romero's last chance. He said I guess he could go out and have another performance, and then he said, Dana's typical. We'll see what happens. But what really hurt this fight more than the obvious of how disappointing it was is that I feel like we were sold a bunch of goods. We were sold a bill of goods with this fight. What was the whole basis on this fight? Israel Adesanya is going to call out the big bad wolf, the guy who nobody wants to call out. So I'm going to take it to him. I'm going to give an impressive performance. That didn't happen at all. So people were just sold on Romero being this unstoppable force, this guy who nobody wanted to fight. They did a hell of a job promoting it. But then when the fight actually happened, it turned out to be kind of like snake oil. It just did not deliver to expectations. So that mixed in with Romero's age, I would be, I wouldn't say I'd be surprised if he gets another title shot, but that's going to be a tough hill to climb.
Yeah, I agree, man. It was definitely a dud. But the one thing I got to say about Adesanya, during the post-fight press conference, he did say that there was a point in the early rounds. It was either I think it was round one, the first overhand left that he got rocked with, whenever that happened, first or second round.
First round, for like first punch of the fight, basically.
Yeah. But that's the one that he said that was his attempt to try to do what he normally does. And he said because he did get a little mouse above his eye from that fight. What he said when he felt it, he admitted that it rocked him, and he was like, I'm not gonna, it's his first title defense too. I mean, he's a new champion, so he's learning. I hate to say it, but these guys want to hold their belts as long as they can, and if you can leg kick your way into a title defense, then I'm not going to fault him for that. Again, the onus is on Romero. It's your shot. You gotta look, just like Adesanya said. I think he hinted at this too, because he mentioned the Gastelum fight a bunch of times afterwards, and he was like, when Gastelum and I were fighting, I fought like I wanted it more, and the onus is on Romero. Like, you got to fight like you want it more. And Romero, like you said, I don't know if he was just maybe he thought it was a 10-round fight or something. I don't know, but yeah, he didn't fight that way.
He wanted to win the People's Championship.
Yeah, exactly. I think he needs to fight Tito Ortiz for that. Then we can finally get rid of that hashtag. But the Adesanya got lucky though, and not lucky to win the fight, but in the sense that by winning the fight, he takes a lot of the pressure off of him. He had a lot of equity built up because of the Whitaker and Gastelum fight, and his Brunson fight, and all the fights where he was a killer. Had he lost this fight, who knows where, who knows what that post-fight press conference is with Dana White. He might be talking about how, God only knows what he'd say about Adesanya losing that fight, how far he falls down the chain. He might have been 3 or 4 fights away again from a title fight, based off that performance. So I would just say Israel really needs to, he needs to do what he needs to do to win. Winning's obviously the most important thing, but if he loses a fight like that, with that kind of performance, I could see the UFC turning on him quicker than we've seen it before.
Yeah,
but the thing with UFC, we're getting low on time here, but they turn around quick with events. This weekend they travel back down to Brazil. Couple fights of note: Kevin Lee, Charles Oliveira main event. Lee coming off of his win of Gillespie, Oliveira just constantly beating people. I believe he's the all-time submission leader in UFC history. Good fight, fun fight. I think Lee wins this fight. I think Oliveira struggles when you get into the top 3, top 5 of the divisions generally. At least that's been his history. Maybe this is where he kind of gets over the hump. But that's a real good fight. I don't know if you guys have any quick thoughts on that, Fernando.
I would just say this: since this will be headlining UFC Brasilia, it'll be a 5-round fight. Kevin Lee's had cardio issues in the past. I think Rafael dos Anjos exploited that beautifully, right? So I think he needs to be cognizant of that. To be honest with you, I think Kevin Lee needs to finish this fight within the first 2 rounds, or else he's in trouble.
Interesting. How about you, Ed?
I mean, maybe I'm just writing off of that knockout from his last fight, but I feel like I don't know. I just got a sense that he's got renewed vigor, renewed interest in competition and stuff like that. Again, we won't know until we see how he's doing out there and when the fight happens, because like you said, like Fernando said, Kevin Lee, yeah, I mean he does have cardio issues, but he definitely still tries to push through stuff. So I mean, and I like Oliveira too, but I mean, you know what? You shouldn't even ask me picks anymore because my picks are horrible.
Well, with that said, we won't pick necessarily the Kona main event, but this is the co-main event of this night is kind of like the potentially the Romero Adesanya of grappling with Damian Maia and Gilbert Burns. These fights never unfold the way we dream about them. I mean, in our minds, we think this is a bunch of transitions and sub attempts and just glorious jiu-jitsu action.
Mm-hmm.
It'll probably end up being a kickboxing bout between two of the best current BJJ guys in all of MMA. I mean, without picking anything, do you guys see it unfolding any other way than that?
No. I think it's going to be a mostly contested in the kickboxing matchup. But you know what? Sometimes it could end up being pretty fun. Ben Askren's stand-up left a lot to be desired, obviously. But, it forced him to stand up when he fought Damian Maia. So it was a pretty entertaining fight, until it got to the ground and Maia's grappling proved to be too much. So I do think this will be a contested on the feet mostly. But if it gets to the ground, eventually we'll be in for a treat.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I always ask the question too when I talk to fighters. Like even when at the Bellator press conference with Cal Eleanor and James Gallagher's matchup, they both carry a lot of submission wins on their record. So, I asked them both the same question if they thought it would cancel each other out, and one of them said, pretty much that the answer was yes. So I feel like the guy in this matchup with Burns and Maia, the guy that feels like they have the superior striking will try to keep it standing and maybe force it. They both compete. I mean, Gilbert Burns is he's never really not in some sort of camp or training. So he is the younger guy. I feel like for a younger guy, when it comes to striking and throw output and stuff like that, he could win a decision on the feet. So I would give the edge to Burns on the feet. If that's how it goes. However, I mean, I don't want to say they cancel each other out in the grappling aspect, but they both have the same type of jiu-jitsu. By that I mean you're not going to see inverted guards or leg locks from these guys unless it's a straight ankle lock or a knee bar. But there's jiu-jitsu and then there's MMA jiu-jitsu, and I feel like MMA, just like they have for wrestling, there's wrestling, there's MMA wrestling. The same thing goes for these guys' jiu-jitsu games. I feel like Maia's jiu-jitsu, because he's been doing it longer, he's got a better MMA jiu-jitsu and might have the edge on the ground. Plus, he's got that ectomorph body type, that long, lanky, wiry guy build, and that makes for a horrible grapple if you've ever grappled with anybody with that build.
Yeah, I see Jake Sage real quick asked if he thinks Johnny Walker's hype train will be derailed this weekend or will he start back it up. Just real quick, I think Johnny Walker is a good, exciting fighter. I don't think he's going to be a world champion. However, I do think Krylov is potentially world champion caliber. He's got a tough loss to Blachowicz and Glover. But I think that at 27 years old, both these guys fighting this weekend are 27. But I think Krylov has a higher upside in MMA. So I think we have an interview with Walker up on MMAnews.com, don't we, Fernando?
Cole Shelton interviewed Johnny Walker recently. He seems very, very focused and intent. Definitely doesn't appear like the loss to Corey Anderson took a hit to his confidence. Maybe it did for like a week or two, but he definitely seems like he's back on track going into the fight with Krylov.
It's a great fight. Really could really be up there. So I look forward to that fight. A couple of the bigger boys, and it'll be interesting to see how Walker rebounds. And but I just I think Krylov is. I think he's got heavy potential. I think Walker does too. I just think he's a little bit more raw at some of the aspects of the fight game. So I don't know. Thanks for joining us, Fernando. You want to throw out any sponsors, your site again, any handles for any social media?
Just want to say, just follow MMAnews.com. You can follow me on Twitter at FQJMMA.com. By the way, shout outs to Jake Steele. I believe Jake Steele is a longtime reader of MMAnews.com. I believe I see him a lot in the comment section on the Facebook page. So if that's you, shout outs to you, my friend.
Nice. Fans can always follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter and Carbeerzol on Instagram. Bellator UFC weekend. Have fun at the fights, gentlemen. Are you making it out to Connecticut, Fernando?
I will not. Ed will be representing MMA News solo.
So follow Ed then certainly on Twitter, and he'll let you know where to go for the insight on that event. Have fun, Ed. Travel safe. Don't get the flu, and I'll talk to you next week. Thanks again, Fernando.
Take care.
Peace.